Hi there, I'm Woolly Wormhead and welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to talk to you about the winding cast on. It's a technique I've been using for a number of years and I really love it because it perfectly mirrors a graft. Now, I can't remember how or where I learned this technique, but I am told that it's similar to a Turkish cast on, but with a slightly different setup. It is of that cast on family where you are casting on two sets of live stitches around a single row of knitting in the middle. All right. For my hats, I've used it in different ways. This hat here is called Chiral, and it's worked flat, and you go up, and then you get to this side and you work down again. Now, I started with the winding cast on in the middle here, and then started to make a U shape, going up and up, keep working that way. And then when I get to the other side, once all the decreasing has been done, you graft at this section in the middle. Some of the other hats in the Lateralis collection start with a winding cast on in the middle, and then you work both halves of the hat coming down from that center point. All right. Another way that I've used this is in the Introspection collection. This is the intro helmet. It has a double thickness brim. It's got a little ridge of like garter, like a pearl ridge along the bottom, which is what the winding cast on can create. And I then worked it in the round to create a tube of fabric that went up. I added more stitches for here to cover around the front and then continued up. And I made this lovely warm double fabric out of it by working it in the round from that cast on. It can be used in a number of different ways. All right, you can work flat coming outwards by going round and going out flat. You can do this kind of like tubing into the double dip fabrics. There's lots and lots of different uses for it. All right. Now, before I get into the nitty gritty of it, I want to say something that some people might think is controversial or might be kind of like, huh? These are not provisional cast-ons. There's nothing provisional about them. They are permanent cast-ons. A provisional cast-on is something like the crochet provisional cast-on, and the cast-on is the waste yarn that you then remove and then you do something with the stitches later. That's the meaning of provisional, that it's temporary or something in place or in lieu of something that you're going to do later. That's the literal meaning of it. And these are not that. These are permanent cast-ons. Yes, they create two sets of live stitches, but they have a row of knitting down the middle. And that row of knitting can actually mess up your pattern if you're not accommodating that, if you're substituting it for a crochet provisional cast-on. Now, the majority of my sideways knit hats start with a plain row on the first panel at the very beginning. So you could substitute this cast on for that plain row, but please keep in mind that it creates a row of knitting that needs to be thought of before you go into a pattern, whereas a crochet provisional cast on doesn't. And they are permanent, you can't take them out. All right, so let me switch the overhead and let me show you how to do it. Okay then, to start this cast on or to work this cast on, you need a pair of circular needles, ideally fairly long because you're going to need the length on the lower needle to be able to pull through it so you can knit across the top and create the stitches. Mine are a little bit curly and they're misbehaving, so I'm going to get them out of the way once I've finished talking about them. Ideally, they need to be 1 or 2 sizes smaller than the recommended needle size in your pattern or the needle size that you are using in your project, okay? I am using short tips, but there is no particular reason why you need to use them. I just prefer short tips. You can use long ones, you can use fixed circulars, use whatever is most comfortable for you. Just make sure that it's got a long cable and it's 1 or 2 sizes smaller than your project. So I'm going to get those bits out of the way. We're going to need one of them later. Let's get it out of the way for now. So to get started, we need to make a slip knot with our main yarn. Okay. And then we slip that onto the top needle that we are working with, and then we'll bring it down here. Now this yarn tail, hold it fairly firmly there. This slip knot is not going to become a stitch. It's just an anchor. All right. So it's going to get discarded later. Don't count it when you are counting your wraps. Now, very importantly, this yarn If it's at the back, make sure it comes up from the slip knot and over the bottom needle. You can see the slip knot there, got to go over the bottom needle. Okay, when you are counting your stitches, that slip knot and this first wrap under the needle don't count. All right, so don't include them in your stitch count. So we are just now going to take it under and over the top. And that's it. You are literally going to wrap the two needles together. You can hold them quite firmly. It's still going to come out a little bit loose. The only real way to tighten it up is if you are a picker. That helps, but even then, it's still a little bit loose. Okay, now I've wrapped that fairly tightly. This is obviously just a demo amount. I don't know how many I've cast on. Yarn tail is out of the way. My yarn is ready to go underneath for another wrap, and we need to keep that in mind. That one there will cast on an extra stitch that we need, so don't let that disappear. So I suggest holding it in your hands to make sure it just doesn't wander, and then you're going to pull this needle up. That's why I recommend a long cable, so that you can come around and start to knit the project with this yarn that's gone around the cable. Okay, so now from this point, with my misbehaving cables, I'm going to try picking. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to knit the stitches or knit the loops that are across the top. So let's see if the picking is more comfortable. There we go. We created our first stitch. They are not stitches yet, not until you've knit into them. I'm normally an English thrower, but that means I drop everything, and that makes the start of this cast on a little bit fiddly for me. All right. And we keep going until we get to the end. And then that slip knot and that cable needle disappear. All right. And there you have your stitches cast on. And make sure when you go to work your next project, or whatever, next row, sorry, that these two do not come undone here. Keep an eye on this when whatever you're going to do next with it, because that then will undo that stitch, and you don't want to do that. You've got an even number of stitches top and bottom. Okay, and let's turn it over. And there's that row that you created that you need to accommodate if you are using it instead of a provisional cast on or something. Okay, but that's it. That's how you do the winding cast on. Okay, and that is how you work the winding cast on. You wind your yarn around your needles, creating a series of loops and making sure that, you know, the yarn tail and the working yarn are doing things that they should be, otherwise you lose stitches. And then you knit into the loops across the top row to create your first row of stitches. And that's what turns them into stitches, turns them from loops into stitches. All right. It may be a little bit fiddly at the beginning, especially if you're an English thrower, but once you've got the hang of it, it goes quite easily. All right. And then you can work around it or back and forth, whatever you're going to be doing for your project. Okay. And I love that ridge that it creates. Now you could, I suppose, try purling into them to put the ridge in the other way, but that's not something I've tried. So if you do try it, let me know how that works. But I think it'd be a bit more fiddly. Knitting it is more comfortable. But try it, let me know. All right then. If you can do the like, share, hype thing, I would really appreciate it as I grow my channel. All right, and happy knitting.